Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now in our 39th episode of 2025. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco and Gaia, the platinum sponsors of Five for Breakfast. So in Washington, Congress is in recess this week with just 1 week remaining until the September 30th funding deadline. Before adjourning, the House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Communications and Technology held a hearing on permitting last Thursday, September 18th. The hearing was entitled Examining Solutions to Expedite Broadband Permitting, and it focused on several related bills, including the soon-to-be-introduced RAIL Act, sponsored by Representative Joyce. Lawmakers from both parties expressed concern over the delay of the NTI BEAD program, emphasizing the critical role of fiber and highlighted the need to streamline deployment. We're encouraged by this step and look forward to continued bipartisan efforts on permitting reform to bring us closer to achieving connectivity for all communities. Final comments for the FCC's network modernization notice of proposed rulemaking are due on Monday, September 29th. The Fiber Broadband Association has circulated our draft comments with our members for their feedback, and we'll be submitting on Monday. And then final submissions from the NTI BEAD benefit of the bargain round continue to trickle in, with Illinois' tentative grant awards for 95% of its $1 billion of funding allocation for nearly 160,000 broadband serviceable locations. Illinois came in around 76% fiber and then roughly 15% LEO satellites. With a handful of states left to report, including Texas with its hefty $3.3 billion allocation, California with $1.9 billion, and Missouri with $1.7 billion. The results so far are roughly about two-thirds, 67% fiber and 20% LEO, with fixed wireless, kicking in around 11% of eligible broadband serviceable locations. So it's super disappointing that if we end up with 20% LEO, that nearly 1 million rural unserved homes and families will get nothing out of this LEO service that they already have available to them. And we're going to end up with, today we have over $18 billion leftover funds, with the other states reporting that's going to be ticked up probably well over $20 billion sitting on the sidelines that won't be deployed to get those million homes with a reliable broadband service. Worse is these homes that are, get the LEO check mark will not be eligible for other government subsidy program because they will be deemed served. While anybody else that, quote, has LEO will be eligible. So last week, FBA held its regional Fiber Connect workshop at the beautiful and historic Davenport Hotel. I love this hotel in Spokane, Washington. It was another just fantastic event with amazing audience engagement. And our next regional Fiber Connect workshop will be held in Scottsdale on October 16th. So it's October 16th coming up in a couple weeks. I hope to see you guys there. And then our last regional Fiber Connect workshop will be in Kansas City on November 11th. And then we'll have our premier member meeting in Palm Springs on December 8th and 9th. Today on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest is Dr. Tom Kamber from OATS from AARP to discuss aging in place powered by fiber. Before I formally introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce David Norris from team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you to everyone who's joined us. We appreciate it. Before I go over a few logistics, we'd like to once again thank our platinum sponsor, Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco and Gaia. Now, as participants, you are in listen-only mode. To ask a question, please type it into the question box, which is located in your screen on the lower left-hand side. We will have a Q&A session with our panelists today. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. And you can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. Finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. If you could take a moment to do so, we appreciate the input. With that, I'll pass things back over to Gary to get us started. Gary?
Thanks, David, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the president and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest was our good friend, Greg Wilson, the CEO of Ripple Fiber, to discuss building an ecosystem to fuel growth and longevity in a highly competitive market. I first met Greg down in Cape Town a few years back when we discussed what was happening with fiber investment in the U.S. market. And he packed up his family, moved to Charlotte, and founded Ripple Fiber, which has had amazing success in rolling out fiber to the home in a half dozen markets. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Fiber Breakfast, our guest is Dr. Tom Kamber. OATS from AARP discuss aging in place, powered by fiber. Now, Tom is the founder and executive director of Older Adults Technology Services, or OATS, from AARP, which he grew from a single site in Bedford, Brooklyn to a national scale, partnering at over 600 locations and serving more than 500,000 participants annually. Tom spearheaded the creation of Senior Planet, the award-winning technology and community building program serving older adults at flagship centers in New York City, Miami, Denver, and across the country through licensing partnerships. In 2021, he led OATS to a successful corporate affiliation with AARP. Tom has taught courses on technology, social entrepreneurship, and philanthropy at Columbia University. He's published in professional and academic journals, and he's presented his work on 5 continents. He has a BA from Columbia and a PhD from the City University of New York, which I happen to know the president of that university. Tom, welcome. And for our audience, please type your questions as we go, and we'll work those in discussions. With that, I will turn things over to Tom.
Thank you, Gary, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm super excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of what you're doing at the Fiber Broadband Association, and a little bit of this presentation will be kind of explaining why I'm such a huge fan of the work you guys are doing. But I'm going to talk through the lens of the work that I've been doing here, focusing on that sort of framework, using older adults as the center of the puzzle here. I started OATS. I'll click through here a little bit. I started OATS all the way back in 2004. We were doing some work helping revitalize lower Manhattan after the 9/11 disasters. And I met an older woman who was in her late 70s, and she wanted to be part of the community revitalization, but she didn't know how to use the internet. And she said, I want to come to your web party, but I don't know if I would be welcome because I'm so old. And that rang a little bell for me. And I had her come to my office and started giving her volunteer lessons, thinking I was going to help her learn technology, which I did, but it took a year. And she helped me learn about how older people were doing things with technology and this kind of new era of aging that was taking place. And I think, you'll all appreciate the kind of framing here, because around 2004 was when a lot of this fiber infrastructure really, I think, started to take off. Back prior to that, I mean, I still remember back when people were using dial-up, and there were DSL things going on around that period. But in 2004, only 22% of people over 65 reported ever being on the internet. So we're talking about a different era there. And what we realized that there was a real need for somebody to help boost that participation rate for older people who were. There's nothing about being old that means you shouldn't be using technology, but we didn't grow up with it, and we don't have the social systems around us, and people. There's no you don't go back to college when you're 60 and learn all these new skills. It's just not how we set things up. So I started this nonprofit, Older Adults Technology Services, OATS. Went out and talked to a lot of older folks starting out in New York City, and we began building technology training classes, really basic stuff. 10-week courses for people who were terrified of computers was kind of one way of thinking about it. Everything was free for older people because we thought of it as a social challenge that we're going to solve together. And we started building these networks and relationships around the city. And one thing led to another. The nonprofit started taking off. We started a program called Senior Planet and opened our first center in 2013 in Manhattan, which was the first technology-themed community center focused on older adults in the entire country. And we immediately had thousands of people coming in for classes. It was very successful. We began expanding our classes beyond simply training on how to get online and what the technology was, but also into what you can do with it around health and different things. And I'm going to talk about that with my next few slides here. And then we adopted our connection with AARP more recently in 2021, which has allowed us to become a national operation in true form. And there's been a lot of growth and change. Gary, I'll let you ask me more specifics around that because I want to make sure we get some time for Q&A, but that's been sort of part of the journey. But understand that we're looking through the lens of working with now millions of older adults, specifically asking what's possible with technology. So I've been kind of at a front row seat for the last 20 years on how all of this fiber has been flowing through the longevity world and absolutely transforming everything. It's been really amazing. So my big theme is connected aging is transformational aging. Our mission at OATS is we say we try to harness the power of technology to change the way we age. Because this longevity revolution is as new as the technology revolution. We've added more years to the human lifespan in the last century than we did in all of previous history. And people are living now into their hundreds. There are people that are saying that babies born today need to be planning to live into their hundreds. We're changing our format for aging, but we haven't really built the systems around it that would expect that everybody's going to live to 85 or 90. Everybody's still looking at it through the lens that we used to in the 1960s or 70s when things were very different. So technology has become one of the critical tools for allowing us to think differently about aging. And the first area that I think it's really been profound is in the work that we've worked on directly. It's changing how models of community are taking place. 25 years ago, if you were an older adult, you went to a senior center and they gave you a lunch, and they might have some bingo, they might have some crafts, you'd be, gluing macaroni onto a styrofoam cup, right? It was kind of limited stuff. Now you've got these partnerships out there. We work with 700 partners around the country now. They are using technology at those sites. Fiber broadband is into those systems. Most of them have it right there to their centers. And they're using that to create educational opportunities, to create interactions between people. We have hybrid programs going on where we'll have people in a community center in, say, Nashville or Sioux Falls, wherever it's going to be, and they'll be taking a class and they're sharing that class with people virtually as a kind of a virtual framework for it. And so people will be in the class from Australia or from anywhere around the country, and they're participating together, learning how to stay safe on the internet. They're learning how to do financial planning. They're learning how to manage their electronic medical records, and they're all participating together in this really broad-based community engagement. So first of all, it's just transformed how people and organizations work together, what we're all doing. Secondly, skills development has changed. Again, originally people would think about, well, you hit your 60s and you retire, and if you have to keep working, you do your best, but you kind of make it work. Well, now the technology has kind of created a little bit of a disconnect between what the old way was, well, your body isn't strong enough to do all this stuff. Well, the tech is allowing people to do more. So you don't have to travel for the job every day. Maybe you do some telework or teleconnection. You can retrain yourself using, Udemy or all these different kinds of online learning resources for people. So the skills of their development, the workforce potential, the gig economy work for many people has created a whole new landscape of economic opportunity for people, in addition to just the fun stuff, right? Those hobbies that people wanted to do back in the day. I'm a woodworker as a hobbyist, and I'm not good at it. So Gary, don't ask to see pictures, but I want to learn how to do better. And I go on YouTube all the time and I'm watching it and I'm downloading some stuff and then ordering some things online. That, enrichment of people's skills has been really profound, especially for older adults who have that additional time in their retirement years or later life years to do more. Social connection is the principal challenge for older people. AARP estimates that about 1 out of every 5 older adults is, depending on how you want to use that word, clinical, but they're severely isolated and they're challenged with that isolation and loneliness. People don't talk about it. Men don't talk about it, Gary. It's a thing. It's like we always say we're okay. We're not okay. We need to have those contacts with people. The technology has enabled us to build those social connections. A few years ago with the city of New York, we helped give away 10,000 tablets during COVID because obviously there was a life and death situation there. And OATS provided the training. We found that if people got a tablet, first of all, just getting a tablet increased your social connections. Everybody made more friends. And we could measure that. We brought in a researcher from Cornell. We set up a control group because not everybody took the class, but everybody got the tablets. The people that got the tablets all made as much as like an average of 1 new friend during the period because they were using the computers, which is amazing during COVID that you expanded your social connection. But we went in and trained about 2,500 of them online using Zoom, and we were experimenting and learning how to do it. Those folks made 2 new friends on average. They expanded their social networks. And so the technology is allowing people to really connect people more. They're participating in more activities. They're finding out about what's going on in the community. It's drawing people out and making them more socially active. Right now, we're still looking at this challenge where, you were talking, Gary, earlier about the fact that so many older people aren't going to get served right now because of our public policy limitations and some of the, I don't know, suboptimal distribution of resources out there, right? And I just want to say, like, the fact that you guys are fighting for broadband access and connection, fiber to people's homes, that strong connectivity that's reliable and that has all that expandability for people is absolutely vital. And I think the fact that so many people are still offline is a terrible tragedy right now. We can't wait. Older adults don't have another 50 years to wait. You know, our timelines are a little bit shorter. So we want to activate people around saying we need to get those home wireline internet connections, that fiber that gives people that broadband. So we've been doing some research. We're actually issuing a report this fall. I'm going to be in Palm Springs talking about it. It's called Aging Connected, where we've updated our data about how many older adults still don't have broadband and access at home the way that they need to. We need to do more. We really need to do more here. That is, we're at a poll here. Is that right here? So how does that work, Gary? Am I all done here? It could be.
Yeah, I don't know if there was
So I'll wrap. So that's the poll. My final point about this is I just want to say I've been doing this work for 20 years, and I set out to make social change in my career. And you can hear, you know, the kind of things we're doing, right? Last year, we served 700,000 people, 760,000 people that came to our programs online and in person, which is like a godsend, right? My vision is I don't get paid in money. I get paid in impact, right? I mean, I do get paid in money, but the reason I do this work is because I want to make a difference. Think about the way that broadband and that fiber broadband specifically has opened up these possibilities for what my organization can do, for what AARP can do with us, and for what older adults are doing with that technology. We are activating some really powerful change in our communities and with the people that we serve right now. And I just want to say thank you for all the work you guys are doing to make that possible. I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for you.
Well, you know, Tom, you're giving me chills because, I mean, my parents are 90 and, you know, they worked till they were 89 at their own business. And, you know, they just got to a point where it just, you know, they weren't able, their memory and hearing and things, you know, kind of limited their ability to work. And it's very difficult, right? Because, you know, we worry about them, you know, when they have to go to the doctor. Like my dad just had cardiac surgery. And it's very difficult to, you know, trust that you're 90 years old, you can jump in the car and run down the doctor because, you know, it might be raining, it might, you know, there's glare on the road, there's, you know, all kinds of things. And being able to have online resources. So I do telehealth because I'm on an island. I like to be able to have world-class doctors, and I don't want to be limited to who's available within driving distance. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what the benefit is from being able to have telehealth?
Absolutely. You know, telehealth is one of those sort of underappreciated stories here. First of all, when COVID happened, as you know, they changed the regulations for reimbursements for doctors and enabled people to get reimbursements for those telehealth visits, which for us was really important because I was already out there training people to do it, but it was kind of seemed a little esoteric. You know, just even 6 or 7 years ago, people were saying, you know, a digital doctor's visit, like, don't they have to be able to physically touch you and do stuff with you? But we started working with a hospital in Brooklyn called Maimonides about 15 years ago when this stuff was really getting to the very early stages. And there was concern that older adults weren't going to want to do health with technology or interact with their doctors digitally. And we started working with the geriatrics department. We're talking people mostly in their 80s and 90s who had some pretty significant limitations physically. We found that they were gobbling up the technology. They were typing their information into the, you know, their formularies, into their electronic medical records. And when they were able to do video sessions with their doctors, it enabled them to have more frequent contact, which was critical for a lot of older adults. They can't get out, they can't travel around as much. And when we spoke to the doctors, we were worried they would say, oh, it's not working. As long as they can get the physical contact every once in a while, they fill in the gaps of those telehealth visits. You're actually adding value to the experience for the customer there on the medical side. And we did a bunch of courses on telehealth recently, and there was a participant out in I guess near Laramie, out that's in Wyoming, and she reported that she had been driving. Every month she had to do an update with her doctor, and she was driving 3.5 hours each way. Just like you're saying, Gary, she needed that doctor who had that skill set for her. She didn't know about telehealth. And so she learned about it through one of our partner sites. She figured out that she could get that through her electronic medical record system. She signed up for it. And her doctor was like, oh, I didn't know that you knew how to use a computer. Like, he hadn't thought about it. So we're saving this with 7 hours round trip every month now. seven
even,
hours in the car just to do that. So it's really profound. And the telehealth stuff is, and it's something that we're still growing right now. I'll tell you that we're still less than a quarter of older adults using telehealth on a regular basis. We think it should double. It's really something that could be a much more valuable resource for people to be getting those supplemental visits with their doctors.
Well, if you ever have to go to the doctor and you see an older adult, maybe they have a walker, limited mobility, they have to have one of their adult children there to provide them. They're spending all day for a 15-minute doctor appointment, and being able to do that online in the comfort of their own home is one, going to increase the amount of times that they go to the doctor because it's more convenient. And then also we had on Fiber Breakfast, we had Harvard behavioral science folks, and they were talking about just even mental health. By using wearables, they can have better patient outcomes because they can be able to, and they just basically use like Apple Watch and things like that to just look at sleep habits and be able to just find out overall better patient outcomes because there's more accountability.
That's right. We have we have a program called Senior Planet, as I mentioned. And just to do a little plug for it, if you go to seniorplanet.org, the website, that's run by us. And we have free classes there, 4,500 classes every year. So every day we've got, 6 or 7 different classes that go on. They range from tech classes to more lifestyle-oriented things. One of those classes is called Morning Stretch. It takes place at 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, and 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. We'll get 600 or 700 older adults on there doing fitness programming together, and they'll actually do stretching and active, workouts together on the Zoom screen, and then they talk afterwards. They kind of have a social 20 minutes. But the thing that's interesting is so many of those people are supplementing that face-to-face live Zoom activity with wearables. They're walking around with a smartwatch. That the home broadband for them is an anchor of a whole series of fitness activities that radiate out from there, and people are so super active with it. That particular program is our highest participation program that we run at OATS.
One of the things there's some recent research that just came out on AI, and it said basically it was a high correlation, like 100% correlation between the quality of your connection and how often you participate. So people that have fiber connections, 75% are participating with AI on a daily basis, and less on cable, much less on fixed wireless, much less on DSL, and only less than 10% when you have a satellite connection. So the quality of your connection, one of the things that as AI becomes, this is going to be a huge tipping point. How are you guys looking at AI and getting seniors to engage with AI?
Well, we were pretty early into the AI space. We've been working with OpenAI as a sponsor for OATS program since early last year. And what we've been focusing on, there's a few pieces of the puzzle here. First of all, there's a need to equalize the playing field. Older adults they don't get the same information that so many younger people get from being in a workplace or being in the college environment or wherever people are going to be sharing with you. So we have to kind of boost the knowledge base a little bit so people can pick up these new emerging technologies and participate in real time as they're growing and becoming prominent. So the first thing we did was we surveyed older adults about AI to ask what they wanted to do with it, how they felt about it. Surprisingly, at least surprisingly to me, they weren't that afraid of it. They were not as anxious as I thought they would be. They are eager to learn AI. They're eager to deploy it. They really want to use it. The two principal things they said, we surveyed almost 1,000 people. The two principal things they said were they want to use it to learn new things, and they want to use it to do kind of production where they're writing and they're having to create things themselves. They're really interested in using it in the creative and writing space. Many older adults struggle a little bit, especially people that English isn't their first language, with the language issues, and AI is a real game changer for them. So we created a course, a series of trainings on AI, basic stuff. What is AI? Where does it appear in your life? How do you recognize it when you're looking for it out there? What are the use cases? We created a report called, it's a document for older adults that's called AI for Older Adults, just introducing them to it and how people can use it, and also thinking about the use cases around your health, your financial scenario, and your social connectivity, and the different places that it would deploy. We experimented with those classes at the community level, and then we did something interesting with OpenAI money. We distributed about 1/3 of the grant to local partners around the country, to 10 different organizations, and asked them to have their staff experiment with us, thinking about how we can activate and support librarians, senior center directors, social workers, housing organization leaders, so that they can handle that AI flow of questions and challenges and opportunities, because they're a little bit, this is a little bit challenging for the community workers that we're dealing with as well. So we created a series of trainings for them. They actually were struggling with AI and have really benefited from those programs. We're ramping up a second year now to help activate more trainings for people. So there's a whole effort here to make sure everybody out there is empowered to understand it and use it. On the fraud side, it's also really important to understand that older adults are vulnerable to fraud and scams disproportionately. It's not just like we have fraud and scams all across America. When you turn 60, you get a target on your back. And older people are really struggling with that. So we have to empower them to understand, first of all, what is a deep fake? How do we think about testing and challenging some of the information that's coming across the screen here? But then secondly, how do you use AI in a more intentional way to keep yourself safe? How do you make a plan for your personal security things and your privacy settings and things like that? We're doing a thing called digital housekeeping this year, where we're setting up a 5-day challenge for older adults to set up their digital spaces so that they're managing their passwords, their privacy settings, thinking about where their documents are going and things like that. And AI is one of the tools that people can use to achieve those purposes.
You mentioned fraud. One of the reasons my parents retired was they had a new roof put on their building, and they received an email from their contractor saying that they changed their banking information for the roof. And so please wire $100,000 to this new, and they went to their bank, and the bank sent it to Chase Manhattan and find out that it was fraud, right? And even though their bank didn't catch it, no one caught it. They just didn't trust themselves to, it wasn't so much $100,000. It was more the fact that they felt that, here my dad, smartest guy on the planet, now feels like he isn't trustworthy because he can't determine what's real and what's not. And so just the mental impact of, being taken by a fraud scam is just really impactful. So, I can imagine with the world the way it is today, just, everybody in your program just on high alert on, how people are trying to.
It's a real crisis. It's a real crisis. And the impact, and so the older you are, the harder it is to recover from these things. And so it really becomes challenging. I just want to mention this. There's a question in the chat here about us providing information to people about different levels of service. We do that every day. So we see ourselves as trying to equalize or close that technology adoption gap for older people and encourage people to consider more investment and more engagement with technology where appropriate and where it fits their lives and needs. But we want people to have those choices. And for many people, a higher level of connectivity, a more robust connection is the better choice. And we try to help them understand the value and understand what they would do with that. A lot of it's the value proposition. And in fact, with Fiber Broadband Association, we're actually planning to develop more classes that are more intentional around that so people can understand the strengths and opportunities that are provided by fiber. So I think it's a great question. We're like eagerly supporting this stuff in general. And we also have a hotline at OATS, by the way, that's on the front page of Senior Planet, the .org, the website. People can call that hotline for free and ask questions, and that is one of the questions we answer pretty regularly.
So, the aging population is now the biggest part of our population, right? And it's growing every day. Do you guys have any stats on what that looks like? Or?
Yeah, it's there's depending on how you cut it, at 50, at 60, at 65, it is the fastest growing portion of our population, especially the older adults, the people in their 70s and 80s and 90s, which is a demographic that was pretty small when I was a child and is now becoming a dominant demographic of people. The big statistic is that I think it's in this decade now that there's more people over 65 than there are under 18 in the country. We're reaching the point where there's a tipping toward a more aged society. And by the way, it's not even by country. The United States is a fairly old society, but Japan and Spain, Italy are much older on average and have a larger population of older individuals. And the African countries and some of the other nations around the world have much younger average populations. And so there's a kind of there's a question around dependency ratios that are featured here, where the more older people there are compared to younger individuals, the higher our challenges in supporting older people who have higher healthcare needs and personal care needs and things like that. We've been surveying caregivers this year. We just completed a survey with caregivers asking what they're experiencing. And there are millions of older Americans around the country themselves that are seniors that are taking care of other people as well in their age cohort. And what we need to do as a country is to solve that balance as we become older, finding ways to create more efficient, more successful models for helping people age in place at home with dignity and independence, and also empowering older adults to advocate for themselves and to take care of themselves. So right now, telehealth is an example. If you learn to use a telehealth system, you can use your doctor visits from home. You may not require somebody to come and drive you to an appointment. You may be able to have better care in a more efficient delivery mechanism there. And we need to continue to find those opportunities. Robotics is an area, I haven't gotten into that. I'm going to talk about that in Palm Springs, but robotics is incredibly powerful in terms of the changes that we can experience in terms of aging in place. And AI, by the way, is a massive game changer in the acceleration of humanoid robots and personal care robots as a potential for consumer use.
My favorite quantum physicist, Michio Kaku, says that we're the last generation that will die, as we can print human hearts and do all these great, amazing things. So we're going to either have these long lives or live forever, the next generation, I guess. So that's going to be really important for ISPs, that their customer base is going to be larger, older adults. Is there a way that ISPs could partner with OATS to be able to target this community to make sure that they all have better broadband connections?
Absolutely. I'm happy I'll give you a couple details on that. I'll just say about quantum physics, by the way, I was reading a book on quantum physics last year, and I was talking to my wife about entangled pairs, that are those particles that know each other no matter where they are. And she was like, "Oh, you're my entangled pair." So we have a romantic quantum physics joke in our household here. We're super geeks. So people, and I will be talking, by the way, about futurism at the Palm Springs event. And so I'm going to interview about 10 futurists about aging and tech, and then we're going to talk about where this is going 10 or 15 years from now, speculate a little bit. It should be pretty exciting. If people want to connect to OATS right now, there's three obvious ways to do it. One is simply go to seniorplanet.org, bring your customers and your family and friends and people, and take advantage of what we're offering for free every single day. It's award-winning programming. We do stuff in Spanish. We do stuff in Chinese. It's fantastic. It's super fun. Doesn't require registration for most of the classes. Everything's free. You don't have, it's a great experience. That's one. Two is we do licensing partnerships with organizations all over America. Those partnerships need to be non-commercial entities. If you have a library, a senior center, a nonprofit, a veterans organization, community groups in your neighborhood or your town, they can join OATS and license our curriculum. We will train them to use it. We will send them free books. We will license that curriculum for free for a whole year. We do not charge those partners. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes we bring money to them. We don't charge them into the future where this is not a commercial process for us. We want those partners to be able to take all of our curriculum and deliver it in those communities. So if I'm an ISP and I'm rolling out some broadband and I want to connect people, and I've got a local library that could be a Senior Planet licensing site, why not have them become an ally in training people so that they could use those skills? So send them to seniorplanet.org/licensing or oats.org/licensing. It's the same splash page. There's an information session you can sign up for. That's a great way to do it. And then finally, we've been working a little bit with you folks. We can do kind of customized projects with people. If you've got like a really intensive need or some capacity, we have an enormous capability to help develop a real community partnership around getting people informed, helping them understand the value proposition, getting them online, supporting them through the process, and helping make a positive kind of feedback loop around this so people really have a good experience.
Well, I love that you and your wife are entangled qubits, but that's great. So Tom, thanks for joining us. Look forward to seeing you in Palm Springs. Really appreciate all the work you're doing with older adults. And, age is all relative. So now older adults are kind of the cool kids. But
that's right. Thank you for having me today. You guys are rock stars, and I'm really honored to be here.
And hope everybody can join us next week. We're going to have Dr. William Adderholt to discuss the future of agriculture grows on fiber. So you're not going to want to miss that. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tom.